Hello everyone, it's me Abid Gafarov from Caspian Watch in the Parliament Assembly Council of Europe June session, and we are honored to interview Mr. Christophe Lacroix, the main reporter on silencing criticizing voices in Azerbaijan. And as you know, on 25th of June, there will be a hearing, detailed hearing on this topic and debate, and hopefully or probably a new resolution will be adopted. Mr. Lacroix, I would like to thank you for having time with us for this interview, and a special thanks to you and your team for doing a great job in defending human rights defenders and journalists, media freedom in Azerbaijan. Thank you very much for your good job. So the first question, Mr. Lacroix, the institutional starting point of your current report goes back to 2022. Motion on the safety of journalists and human rights defenders. In October 22, another motion also warned about the growing number of political prisoners in Azerbaijan, including my arrest on fabricated defamation charges. Looking back from 2026, how do you think the Azerbaijani authorities' model of repression has changed? Has it moved from individual persecution to a systematic policy of silencing critical voices?
You are right. You are speaking about a situation that has developed and worsened since 2022, and that has become even harsher today, in 2026. But the systematic repressive line of President Aliyev, his government, and his regime began in 2014. So it goes even further back. And this is not just about arbitrary executions or arrests. It is a real totalitarian and authoritarian system aimed at silencing all voices that criticize the regime in Azerbaijan, and that criticize it on completely legitimate grounds. So this is not only a regime that suppresses voices that oppose its policies, it is also a regime that destroys democracy. It is truly tragic to see this in a country that came out of the former Russian Empire and the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. That people had the right to aspire to a European-style, Western-style democracy. But no, a heavy lead cover has been placed over the country again, and what is happening in your country is truly terrible.
Thank you. Again, I'd like to thank your team for a detailed report. Your report shows that not only journalists, but also human rights defenders, election observers, opposition figures, academics, and whole independent media teams are being targeted by the same repressive mechanisms. How do you assess this picture? Is this only a human rights crisis, or is it also the dismantling of the last remaining parts of democratic society in Azerbaijan?
This is a very hard and painful truth. But today, we can say, for example, that independent local media no longer exists in Azerbaijan. They either have to hide, or they have to take refuge abroad, as you have done. Even when you are abroad, threats can still hang over you, your family, and your relatives. Today, 36 journalists are in prison in Azerbaijan, and they are being held in terrible conditions. They are accused with false evidence, corruption claims, and allegations of foreign influence. All of this is completely unfounded. Azerbaijan is considered one of the most repressive countries when it comes to imprisoning journalists. But as you said, this is not only about journalists. It affects all of civil society. It even affects university researchers. So anyone who decides to speak and express an opinion freely is arrested. Trials are falsified, cases and procedures are invented, and reasons are created to keep people in prison and give them heavy sentences. So we cannot say that the judiciary in Azerbaijan is independent from the authorities. On the contrary, it is dependent on them.
Yeah, thank you. Also, your report notes that a fact-finding visit to Azerbaijan was not possible. PACE members were declared persona non grata, and the Azerbaijani delegation did not take part in PACE's work in 2025 and 2026. When a reporter is not allowed into the country and the authorities step back from dialogue with PACE, how can the Council of Europe monitor the real situation and make sure Azerbaijani society is not left alone?
Indeed, Like other colleagues, I am also on the persona non grata list because I voted in favor of resolutions condemning the Aliyev regime. But that is not the problem for me. The real difficulty, as you said, is how to be fully informed about what is happening there. For this, we have independent media outlets like yours that inform us about the situation. We also have international humanitarian organizations, such as Amnesty International, that prepare reports. In addition, within the Council of Europe, there is the Committee of Ministers, which supervises the execution of judgments of the European Court of Human Rights. At the level of the Committee of Ministers, quarterly meetings are held, and member states that delay the execution of court judgments must report. It is clear that Azerbaijan is currently not participating in these activities of the Committee of Ministers. That is why, in my report, I ask the Committee of Ministers to require Azerbaijan to return to these meetings. In addition, within the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, we have the Monitoring Committee, which aims to prepare reports every 3 months on the human rights situation in several Council of Europe member states. I also ask this monitoring committee to follow more closely what is happening in Azerbaijan, based on all the information we can obtain.
Thank you. And again, your report gives special attention to the law on media, the law on political parties, and legislation on NGOs. In practice, these laws restrict independent media, civil society, and political pluralism. Do you think the Azerbaijani authorities are now carrying out repression not only through the police and courts, but also by turning the law itself into a tool of authoritarian control?
Oui, oui, incontestablement. Incontestablement.
Yes, without any doubt. This is definitely the case. Parliament is under President Aliyev's control, as is the government, of course, and also the judiciary. To force the judiciary, Parliament adopts laws that destroy freedoms in the area of thought and political freedom. Political parties that could be funded from abroad are banned. There are laws that ban all forms of political freedom because they are presented as anti-Azerbaijani propaganda. As I also show in my report, there is a major problem. President Aliyev has created a mechanism that blocks the possibility of expressing a different opinion. This mechanism includes the government, the judiciary, and the legislative system. That is why, for me, we are not only dealing with an authoritarian state, we are also inside a totalitarian state.
Donc, pour moi, on est vraiment dans la conception d'un État autoritaire, mais également dans un État totalitaire.
Thank you. Your report actually is full of these the facts. So that's why I prefer to refer to the report. So, fifth question: the report raises serious concern about allegations of sexual violence. Sexual violence, threats, and humiliating treatments against women journalists in detention. These claims do not look like isolated misconduct by individual officials. They point to impunity and a policy of fear inside the prison system. What concrete steps should PACE demand? The publication of CPT reports, international monitoring, or individual accountability for those who are responsible?
Je crois qu'effectivement, là aussi, il y a un gros problème de respect des droits humains, puisqu'il y a beaucoup de...
I believe there is truly a major problem here in terms of respect for human rights, because there are many cases of violence and completely inhuman treatment in prisons. The reports of the Committee for the Prevention of Torture must be published. International inspections in this area must continue. As for sanctions, I cannot take a firm position, because individual sanctions cannot be announced by the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. But this issue should probably be examined by the Committee of Ministers. Member states can act individually. As a parliamentarian, I have personally appealed to my own government about possible sanctions against the regime of President Aliyev and against those responsible for crimes and abuses committed in Azerbaijan. I believe it is the responsibility of our national governments and also of the European Union to consider a consistent series of sanctions in order to change this regime. At the international level, we can clearly see that if sanctions or concrete measures are not taken against officials and certain individuals, the situation does not develop quickly enough, or it does not change at all. We see this in the context of the genocide in Gaza with Israel, and we also see it with the Putin regime. So there is a serious problem that absolutely must be examined.
Le régime Poutine également, donc il y a un gros problème qu'il faudra examiner, effectivement.
Yeah. And also your report shows that the same pattern of accusations has been used against Abzas Media, Toplum TV, Meydan TV, Hürriyet TV, Channel 11, Channel 13, and other independent media groups. The case of Ulvi Hasanli is especially alarming. He had earlier testified before PACE committee and later received a heavy sentence. Do you see this as retaliation for cooperation with international organizations?
Oui.
As a punishment here?
Oui, c'est pour moi une punition.
Yes, for me this is punishment. I was there. I was present at the meeting where this independent journalist, Mr. Hasanli, came to testify. It was very impressive, and I also understood what great risks he was taking. There were representatives from Azerbaijan in the room, and it was clear that he was being watched and recorded. It is very unfortunate that the Parliamentary Assembly or international organizations cannot provide international protection to people who are invited here to testify. He spoke with facts and presented certain information. Then he and other people who accompanied him were arrested. This is also the difficulty of the Parliamentary Assembly. It is made up of foreign delegations, and the Azerbaijani parliamentary delegation did not come here in a spirit of cooperation. They came in a spirit of repression, and in order to block any investigation that we could carry out.
D'enquête que nous aurions pu mener.
Agree. Mr. Lacroix, the report also refers to the attempted assassination of Mohammad Mirzali. So this is about transnational repression, which is a new threat to journalists, bloggers, and civil activists. The killing of Vidad Iskandarli in France and the pressure against Azerbaijani critics living abroad. It seems that the Azerbaijani authorities target critics not only inside Azerbaijan, but also in Europe. What should Council of Europe member states do to protect these people? Speed up asylum procedures, reject politically motivated extraditions, or strengthen security mechanisms?
Alors je crois, en tant que membre de l'Assemblée parlementaire,
As a member of the Parliamentary Assembly and as a Belgian parliamentarian, I believe that member states must put an end to all forms of hypocrisy in their relations with Azerbaijan. Today, President Aliyev is received all over Europe. He is also received by the European Union. But he is a dictator. That is why I believe every member state must review its position on this issue. Of course, there is the factor of oil and gas prices. But at a certain point, I think blood also has a price. And the price of blood is far more important than the price of oil and gas. I believe every member state must take a protective position toward Azerbaijani political refugees and asylum seekers. As I said earlier, international protection mandates or other measures must be taken. We must all understand that we have to protect the Azerbaijani people, and especially the critical voices in Azerbaijan. In similar regimes, for example, I am sorry, the Azerbaijani government will not be pleased with what I am going to say. But these are sometimes dictatorial governments that can be compared with regimes we have seen in Syria or Libya. At that time, sanctions were applied against them at a certain point. Even if negotiations continue, because negotiations are necessary, there can always be a moment when sanctions must be applied. Most importantly, dissident voices and people who seek refuge in our countries must be protected. I think this must be done urgently. It depends on each member state and on the will of each country, and we must move away from this hypocrisy.
volonté de chaque État membre et sortir de cette hypocrisie.
Thank you. PACE has been making calls to Azerbaijani authorities for many years. But your report also shows that these calls have not led to serious changes in Baku's behavior. Do you think targeted individual sanctions are now needed, such as visa bans and asset freezes against judges, prosecutors, and officials in the penitentiary system and security agencies? Could such measures create real pressure on the regime?
Je pense que oui. Ça ne dépend pas de l'Assemblée parlementaire du Conseil de l'Europe. Ça dépend
I think yes. As I said earlier, this depends not on the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, but more on member states and their political will. However, I think the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe should play a leading role by reporting to all member states about the difficulties related to Azerbaijan. This is exactly why, in my report, I appealed to the Secretary-General of the Council of Europe, Mr. Alain Berset, and asked him to activate Article 52 of the European Convention on Human Rights. This convention, and Article 52, gives the Secretary-General the right to request a precise report from Azerbaijan on whether it is complying with the convention. So, for the first time, the Committee of Ministers would require a report from Azerbaijan, from President Aliyev and his government. I hope that, on this basis, the Committee of Ministers, together with all member states, will be able to act toward the gradual restoration of democracy and toward a real dialogue with President Aliyev.
avec le président Aliyev.
Thank you. Azerbaijan is a member of the Council of Europe, but it does not send its delegation to PACE. Serious problems remain with the implementation of European Court of Human Rights judgments. I know you earlier mentioned about it. And the human rights situation is getting worse. In these circumstances, how do you see Azerbaijan's future in the Council of Europe? Where should PACE draw its red lines?
Écoutez, pour l'instant, c'est compliqué de voir un avenir pour l'Azerbaïdjan au sein du Conseil.
Look, at the moment, it is complicated to see Azerbaijan's future in the Council of Europe. Today, Azerbaijan's delegation to the Parliamentary Assembly is not participating because they are not submitting their credentials. This means that we cannot even decide whether to accept them here or not. This situation allows them not to fulfill their obligations. For example, this is one of the reasons why they do not respect the judgments of the European Court of Human Rights and do not want to appoint a new judge to the court. On the other hand, they remain a member of the Committee of Ministers. This is where the ambiguity lies. As a parliamentarian, not as a rapporteur at this moment, because I have prepared the most objective report possible. But politically, as a member of parliament, I cannot understand how a country can leave the Parliamentary Assembly and still continue working in the Committee of Ministers, even if not on all files, and become a kind of half-member of the Council of Europe. Dialogue must be revived, but Azerbaijan must return to the Assembly under the strict conditions set by this Assembly. Since Azerbaijan signed treaties in order to participate here, it must accept all the formal conditions required by the Council of Europe. In other words, this is not just a signature on a document. It must be a constant practice shown by delegations when they carry out their responsibilities inside the institutions of the Council of Europe. And for me, this is of course a red line. If Azerbaijan does not agree to gradually release prisoners, repeal political laws, repeal laws that suppress freedom of speech and thought, and end all the elements of torture that we know about, then there can be no question of readmitting it to the Assembly. All of this must stop. Only in this way can we work effectively together, and we need to see signs of goodwill from the regime of President Aliyev.
Volonté du régime du président Aliyev pour pouvoir effectivement travailler correctement ensemble.
Thank you. This report is not only a document addressed to the authorities, it also speaks to Azerbaijani society. Journalists, human rights defenders, families of political prisoners, and democratic forces are under heavy pressure. What would be your message to the people of Azerbaijan? In a country where fear is becoming normal, how can people protect human dignity, free speech, and hope for democracy?
Tout d'abord, je voudrais exprimer mon...
First of all, I want to express my admiration for the Azerbaijani people who continue to live under a totalitarian regime and who sometimes risk their lives and freedom in order to live with dignity. I honor the memory of all those who are no longer alive, but who fought for freedom in Azerbaijan. I would like to encourage all those who continue this struggle directly or indirectly, whether in Azerbaijan or abroad. I want to tell them that they will find support in my report. This is both moral and political support. Even if their struggle is silenced in Azerbaijan, it is explained here. It will be voiced in the Assembly, discussed in the Assembly, and published as an official document. The regime of President Aliyev will no longer be able to say that all of this is completely invented. So continue your struggle and be very careful with regard to yourselves and your families. But know that the member states of the Council of Europe must stand behind you. I stand behind you, and I will support you to the end with all the means I have, in order to give you, your families, and everyone you love a prosperous and peaceful future.
Un avenir serein, un avenir paisible pour vous, vos familles et toutes celles et tous ceux que vous aimez.
As we know, Russia has impact on former USSR countries. For example, when I was in the OSCE event, I noticed that there are some former USSR countries making the side event with the title Russian Intervention to the Democratic Lawmaking in Georgia, for example. How do you think? So it is obvious, yeah, as you see, the new law on media, new law on politics, similar what is done in Georgia, in Russia, Georgia, and now transferred to Azerbaijan. How do you think, how can we, Azerbaijan, Georgia, and other countries, former USSR countries, how can we stop Russia from intervening to our internal domestic democratic lawmaking process, or how European community can help us to prevent it from happening?
Mais je pense que, je vais vous dire, si la Géorgie, l'Azerbaïdjan étaient des démocraties,
Let me tell you this. If Georgia and Azerbaijan were democracies, they would be able to resist the propaganda, measures, and laws imposed directly or indirectly by Vladimir Putin and his regime. We saw this in Hungary. Viktor Orban was left out in the elections, he was defeated, and Peter Magyar took his place, because Hungarians wanted democracy and respect, and they no longer wanted this Russian influence. They were able to do this because democracy existed there. So we must act on two levels, in two directions, at the level of the European Union and the member states of the Council of Europe. First, we must force the regimes in Georgia and Azerbaijan to restore democracy at the highest possible level, so that the people truly have a voice. Then, at the level of the European Union, we are applying sanctions against the regime of Vladimir Putin and against oligarchs, and this must continue. We are here to support the Ukrainian people. At the same time, we must stand with the Georgian and Azerbaijani peoples, and also with other peoples who are under Russian pressure or interference. I am thinking, for example, of Serbia. There are also concerns there. That is why we must be very vigilant and act with real determination through diplomatic, political, and economic sanctions.
avec des sanctions à la fois diplomatiques, politiques et économiques.
Exactly. And while you mentioned about the democracy and about the gas, the main important question, I would say, for this interview, we hear very frequently that Aliyev is trading the gas for democracy. And it seems that the European community or organizations are happy with this trade. So how do you think how Europe will stop the dictators and ignoring this gas for democracy trade? Because this is very vital for the people, for the nations who own oil or gas, but they cannot use the benefits of it. Yeah. So when we should expect Europe to say no to the gas for democracy trade?
Moi, je suis partisan d'une fermeté sur le sujet et je pense qu'effectivement,
I support a firm position on this issue. I believe that we must deal with gas and oil supplies through the lens of respect for our values. even if we now buy less Russian gas or oil, or do not buy it through normal routes. I say normal routes because parallel routes such as Azerbaijan still exist. We still have to approach the issue of supply through our values. The European Union, the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, and the Council of Europe were created after the war, after the Second World War, with the idea that we want democracy, we want justice, and we want social, political, and economic freedom. So today, if we negotiate with a dictatorial regime such as the regime of President Aliyev in order to obtain energy resources such as gas and oil, I think we must have the courage to set conditions. We must say, fine, you supply us, we need it. We want gas and oil from you. But on the other side, you must commit to starting political reforms to improve freedom, the freedom of journalists, political freedom, and the independence of the media and the courts. In my view, a trade agreement only makes sense if it is linked to political and humanitarian measures. I see a great deal of hypocrisy inside the European Union on this issue. As a socialist and a human rights defender, what shocks me most is seeing the red carpets laid out to welcome President Aliyev, or all those events organized in Baku to give the regime an international image. There is a point at which we must stop this because it has become completely shameless. It is completely immoral. And I hope that the members of the European Union, the heads of EU governments, Ms. Kallas and Ms. von der Leyen, will read my report and understand that yes, Europe has economic interests, but Europe's political interest does not mean cooperating with dictatorships like the Aliyev regime while closing its eyes completely.
De collaborer en fermant les yeux complètement avec des dictatures du type de celui du régime Aliyev.
Mr. Lacroix, I'd like to thank you again and entire your team who spent their time in preparation of the marvelous report which will be presented tomorrow, and I'd like to thank and congratulate you and entire your team. Thank you very much for your great effort in protecting the media freedom of speech and the human rights in Azerbaijan. Thank you very much again, and good luck in future. And hopefully and definitely we will cooperate with you in terms of providing the valuable reports on what is going on in Azerbaijan. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.